Today we are talking about what the church got wrong about sex. And let's be real. Many of us who grew up in church world either never heard sex talked about, or when it was talked about, it was just plain weird. Like my favorite, like only have sex in the dark. Now that's weird. Welcome to the Campbell and Amanda podcast. My name is Campbell.
My name's Amanda.
And we're going to talk about this today. Yay! All right. I mean, you excited?
Breathe.
By the way, full disclosure, this is the second time we are recording this because the first time I couldn't stop laughing. I was just like, yeah, that's a thing.
Right.
Yeah, apparently it's a thing.
But we have to talk about it. It's, again, it goes things are unspoken. And even when you do want to talk about it, it's shameful. So we need to talk about it.
Yes, we do. And I mean, don't get us wrong. There are some things that the church has gotten right about sex. For example, that sex is sacred.
Yeah, it's
right?
holy and it's something that is set apart.
It's set apart and set apart for the institution of marriage. Now, we can disagree on that or agree to disagree because we're not assuming that you're coming from a religious background hearing this. But hopefully you will stick around just to kind of hear where some of these beliefs have come from and how they've been perpetuated in the church. You know, so for example, the church told one of the good things they told us, like we said, sex is sacred. But there was also something that wasn't taught, that wasn't said, but it was inadvertently taught, right?
Yeah.
Like sex is shameful.
Right.
Exactly. And that's why no wonder today we have so many sexless marriages, Christian marriages to begin with.
Which is, I mean, this is loaded. I have 1,000 things going on in my head that we can, but I'm holding to the script for now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So let's be clear. Let's be very clear about this. God created sex.
Exactly. 100%.
100%, and God called it good.
It wasn't the devil's idea.
No, it wasn't the devil's idea. Okay, so it is super important that people understand that and always remember that God created sex. And by the way, God did not just create sex for reproduction. He created it for pleasure, for enjoyment, for intimacy, for unity in a marriage.
All of those things.
All of those things. It was his idea. And he didn't even blush.
He doesn't blush.
He doesn't blush.
He sees it all.
He sees it all. We're going to get into this because some people think, again, I think this whole having sex in the dark thing comes into play because
God
I think
can't
people.
See in the dark.
Yeah. God can't see in the dark, apparently. Okay, so let's dive in. What did the church teach about sex that they got wrong and why does it hurt us? Number one, you want to go?
Yeah, sex was taught with fear, and that's 100% my experience. Sex was taught with fear and not joy. So we were told, don't do it, don't think about it, don't feel anything. It's wrong.
It's wrong. And so when you come into marriage or when you came into marriage or are considering marriage, you didn't feel free. You felt confused, guarded, and even ashamed.
And some people, I kid you not, some people don't even know what it is.
Yes.
They are trying to get pregnant without doing it.
That's not true. I heard that.
A true story.
True story.
I was told about that.
Yeah. How do you think people get pregnant, people? How do you think they have babies? All right. Yes. But it is super important to understand that in the church world, sex was always taught with fear and not joy.
Yeah.
Right. And I love, I think we're going to get into the scripture where God talks about when he created Adam and Eve, and the Bible says that they were both naked and unashamed, and they felt no shame. But in church world, I think it was kind of a protection mechanism to make sure that young people were not getting pregnant out of wedlock. And so whenever you heard about sex, it was always taught with this fear. You shouldn't do it because it is only reserved for marriage, but when you have been conditioned to fear something, it is very hard for you to enjoy it when you get there.
Yeah, and also one of the difficulties of preaching abstinence is that there's also not a follow-up as to, okay, I'm trying to be abstinent, but I have these feelings, so how do I deal with them?
Exactly.
So that was also not addressed.
Exactly. And then the second thing that the church taught was that purity was defined by performance, not the heart, right? So we were taught that virginity was everything. Virginity was everything.
Right. And not that it's not the goal. For us, it was the goal. But for those who were not, had lost their virginity, they messed up. They were made to feel dirty and made also to feel like God would love them less, which is error.
Yes.
100% error.
Yes. And whenever you preach performance and not focus on the heart, you always create a system where when somebody does something, when somebody breaks, quote unquote, that rule or law that has been put in place, they hide instead of coming out in the open to come and say, I did this or I felt this, what should I do next? So we created environments that were not filled with grace, but rather with judgment, right? And so instead of teaching that purity begins first with the heart, we say, no, here are the 10 rules that you should have, that you should follow. And if you don't follow these rules, then you are doing something wrong.
There's something wrong with you. There's
something wrong with you. And that's what shame is all about. Shame says there's something wrong with you, right? I remember one time there was a friend of mine who came, a girl who came to get something from our house. I think it was like a tape or something, or CD, and she was borrowing it. And I didn't think anything of it. And so she comes over, and she knocks on the door. I open the daddy's home, and I introduce her to him. Oh, this is my friend that says hi. They get into some, polite conversations, etc., and they leave, and she leaves. I walk her home and I come back. That's innocent enough, right? I just want you to get a picture of the environment in which I grew up in. And days later, when something happened with somebody else, this wasn't even me. Like something happened, somebody did something else. And all of a sudden, Dad was like, yeah, and here you are bringing a girl over here and talking about she's my friend. You can't just be a friend with a girl. So I'm like, oh my gosh, you're killing me.
And I have the other end of the spectrum where I wear my hair in a bun and I wear long dresses, and my dad is like, you got to put your hair down and wear shorter skirts. You're never going to get a boyfriend. Show a little leg. You're never going to get a boyfriend.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, but we laugh about it, but when you're talking to young people and these are the images that you're planting in their minds, you're creating perceptions about what sex is and how they relate to the opposite sex. Super, super important.
And that's all outward appearances outward acts and outward appearances that people are talking about, when really the Lord is concerned about the heart.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that if you've messed up, let's say you got pregnant out of wedlock, you broke your own vow to be a virgin until you got married, always remember that you can always run to God. And in fact, in Genesis, when you find Adam and Eve have committed this great sin, what happens is that God's first question is, Adam, where are you? Right? God gives him an opportunity to run back to him. And, God doesn't discard the brokenhearted. He doesn't throw them away. He restores them, right?
Yeah.
And your mistake is not the end of your life. It's just the beginning of your story, And so it's super important to remember that.
Yeah, I mean, God restores. God restores. And your story doesn't end with failure. God is the one holding the pen, so stop trying to write the story for him. Your story doesn't end with failure. It begins with grace.
Exactly.
And grace is a person.
And grace is a person, right? And then the third thing that I heard over and over again, and especially as you near marriage and you hear about people about to get into marriage as Christians, what you get is this talk about sex being presented as a duty and not a delight. Yeah,
you hear that a lot for women. Your husbands need sex so much, and you have to do this for them. And, Yeah.
It was always framed as this is how you serve your husband, right? Instead of it being presented as a mutual joy and emotional bonding event
Right.
that you have. And so when you think about what people are taught, even before they get into marriage, about sex in church world, and you're hearing that this is my duty, and even when you don't feel it, you feel like I should do it because I was taught that this is my duty.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I'm conflicted about, I've even advised somebody myself, you know, your husband, she asked, you know, my husband comes home really late at night and I'm asleep and he wants, and, you know, for various reasons, of course, I'm not going to share them all here. I did say, have sex with your husband, you know, but, you know, it's difficult.
Give him a little something, something.
But it's because of this culture that we've created around sex.
Yes. Yeah. And it's super important to realize that when you look at biblical teaching around sex, you will find that God always talks about this mutual service that it is to each other, right? Like in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 3 to 4, the Bible says that the husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to the husband. So it is never one-sided. It is not the woman or the man alone. It is something that you mutually come to do because it is a delight. It is something that brings you together as a couple.
And it's not something that happens all of a sudden. It's like, it's a grooming, it's an expression of love throughout the entire day, because you know, I say to my husband, he knows this all the time, if he just comes up and grabs me from behind, I feel like a tool. So there's got to be some kind of love, expression of love that is not sexual throughout the day, because I don't want to feel like a tool for his delight. I want to feel like we delight in each other.
Exactly. And I think that that's where we kind of make a mistake as guys when it comes to sex. I always say to my wife, and I always say to guys, like, it's very easy for a guy to get turned on. All you have to do as a woman is just drop your pants and just undress, and we've lost it, right? But when it comes to the woman, what I have learned and what I always teach young men is that sex doesn't begin at the time that you guys are in bed together and about to do it, right? It begins way before that, right? And it begins, if you really are planning this throughout the day, like you're thinking about it, when you think about having sex and you're in the middle of your day, send a text to your wife, to your spouse. Say, hey, thinking about you, girl. Hey, what's up? You know, and get that conversation going. Begin to connect at that level. You know, I don't want to be the only one talking here about this. She has thoughts too.
Well, I mean, it's also, I've heard people say put it on the calendar, which some people say, well, that feels really impersonal. But when life gets busy, you know, sometimes we can just forget to connect on that level, or we can be too tired at the point that we have time. So we have to be proactive and make sure that we are thinking about that, so that we can make sure that we are in the right frame of mind and we have enough energy, and we're going to be coming to this place of intimacy unselfishly, like not trying to rush so that you can go to sleep, but actually there to make a connection, and not just to have sex, but to have an emotional, physical, spiritual connection with somebody.
Yes. And like I tell guys, like, talking is so important. Right? Before even the act, doing something that helps you reconnect emotionally, spiritually, is super important to the level of satisfaction that the sexual act itself has. Because if you just go in selfishly to get what you want out of it as a man and leave your partner wanting, that is a problem as well, because then you are really being self-centered and selfish about sex.
And the other problem is not communicating.
Yes.
You know, for a wide variety of reasons, something may not be pleasurable, or something may have an adverse reaction to being touched a certain way. Maybe you had some sort of abuse in your childhood, or it just doesn't feel good. So, being able to feel free to have that kind of communication is helpful because it builds your intimacy, and it's enjoyable. It is a mutual act for mutual benefit, not just for one person.
Yeah, I remember one day, because we were pastors, we're kind of in a sabbatical, an indefinite sabbatical right now. But when we were leading our church, there's one time I talked about sex and preached about sex. And one of the parents in church who had a 13 or 14-year-old who was actually in the church listening to the message came to me and said that, maybe I shouldn't talk about sex because their son was in church. And I say to them very, very honestly, I'm like, I got news for you. I got news for you. The chances that your son has already been exposed to something sexual, especially online, is very, very high. And if he doesn't hear a healthy view of sex from the church, he is going to take on the cultural definitions and cultural perspective on sex instead of what we deem to be a godly perspective.
Yeah.
Right? And so in church world, you have things like that, where people still think it should be taboo for you to talk about sex, especially from the front of the church. Like, you shouldn't talk about that. Like, what world are you living in? These kids are being exposed to sex all the time.
Who would you rather teach them about it? The internet or you? You or somebody that is respected that can. I mean, I literally was getting married in a couple of weeks, and I love you, Mom, but I went to my mom and she's like, don't talk to me about that. I'm like, Mom, you have 4 kids, like, I know you know something, but
unless we all just fell from heaven.
There's so much shame around it. There's so much taboo and stigma around having conversation about sex, but it's a healthy part of our lives, and it's something that's happening. And our kids know about it.
Our kids know about it, and we need to talk about it. And so one of the things that we always taught people in church world, and this was always uncomfortable for people, there's certain things that I ask people to say. First of all, say sex is good.
Sex is good.
Sex is good. And then the second word I would ask them to say is masturbation.
Masturbation.
Right? And people would get so uncomfortable with that because those are words that they're not used to hearing in church. But when we bring those things to the open and begin to freely talk about it, we can unpack and help people navigate.
And there's healing.
Oh, yes.
Because there's healing for people who have been molested in one way or another. There's healing for people who have already been sexually active and feel some sort of shame or discomfort, or they're trying to hide it. There's healing when things are brought to light. Then there's opportunity for healing. Then really, the devil doesn't have that hold over you. You've got a secret that you've got to keep.
Exactly.
And you can find healing.
And the other thing people too don't do, at least in and we can only speak from the Christian marriage perspective because we've spent over 20 years in that world, is people don't. And I think you hinted at this. People don't usually talk about what they enjoy in the sexual act. So the spouses stick to one thing and they never try out anything. In fact, there are some circles of Christianity that actually say there are certain things that are no-go areas for a Christian marriage. My question is, who defined that? Because I've been reading the Bible quite a minute, and I haven't found God, writing whole chapters about what is acceptable and unacceptable in the sexual act. That is not sin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did that just make sense?
Yeah, I mean, without going into detail.
Without going in. No, because it's super, super important, because there's some, and I heard this, and I wish I could find the video, but I heard this one pastor's wife talking about the only position that is allowed in a Christian marriage is a missionary position. I know it's got missionary up in there, but that doesn't mean like this is God stamped under proof. This is all you do. Like, no. Anyway,
right.
It's weird.
I mean, like you said, there's no biblical text that alludes to or explicitly suggests that this is the way, the only way, that, you can't explore, you can't try new things. No, there's none of that.
There's none of that.
That's not to say we're wild and crazy, but
yeah. Hey, listen. If people want to hang poles and chandeliers in their bedroom and do their thing, do you, boo boo? Do you? All I'm trying to say is, like, we shouldn't make the Bible or God say what He didn't say. That's all I'm trying to say.
And it's a mutual pleasure that we're looking out for here. We're mutual pleasure and the communication, the freedom to communicate lovingly, unselfishly, so that we can serve each other and meet each other's needs.
Exactly. And that's why that whole talking is super important. Hey, did you enjoy that? No, I didn't. Okay. Hey, well, that was so pleasurable. Do it again. Right?
Right.
Do it. And anyway.
My mom is blushing.
Your mom definitely, I can see it. Mom, you're blushing. Come on, cut it out. All right. No, but and then the other, and somebody asked me this, and honestly, I'm conflicted about this, but they had a very good point when it came to committed Christians who are still single, but still want to pleasure themselves. Are sex toys allowed? I'm still conflicted on that one. I don't have a biblical answer on that. I ain't gonna lie.
Well, do we want to go down the rabbit hole of talking about masturbation?
Go ahead.
Really? I thought you were gonna say no.
Hey. No holds barred. Let's go.
Well, one of the dangers, the danger is that marriage, a union between a husband and wife, is like an example of entering the Holy of Holies. So that's why when you get married, usually the pastor will say the two have been united. You may have a unity candle. Really what happens is, in the act of sex, you have become one. And so it's a really sacred act. So where are we going with this? In terms of masturbation, it can usually leads to some sort of image or imagery where you are becoming excited or becoming aroused by looking at, watching, viewing, visualizing some sort of imagery, which therefore becomes some sort of, in my opinion, it's having sex.
Okay.
You want to chime in? We're getting into argument now.
I'm not going to argue. I don't like.
But it's difficult because then you have all that experience. You do get married.
Yeah.
And then you've been flirting and engaging with fake people through imagery all this entire time that you've been masturbating, and so you have to contend with that. You have to contend with that in your marriage. So that's a conversation to have around that.
Yeah, my whole take on that is, and I can talk about because just guys, will come and ask this question, and first of all, I joke with them. I give them the classic: go take a shower, go take a cold shower, right? Calm down. Oh gosh, don't get me started. Oh Lord, this should be X-rated right here. No, but in all seriousness, I say to them, okay, what, like you're talking about, what imagery are you having when you're masturbating? Because people masturbate to porn, people masturbate just to their own imagery, or people, and I cannot dispute this, but I've heard of people I don't have anything in my mind. Everything is focused on just me pleasuring myself, right? What we know, for example, when it comes to neuroscience is just how the brain gets hooked on sex, or how people even become sex addicts, is that first sexual experience especially teaches your brain a pattern for arousal. Right? And that, if you're not careful, that can become the template that your brain uses to get the maximum pleasure during sex. So, for example, if you have been pleasuring yourself consistently for a very long time through masturbation, you have taught your brain that this is the best way you're going to be pleasured the most. And so when you get into a relationship where you find a partner and you finally get married and have sex with them, it might be underwhelming because it is not your brain's basically you would need to reteach your brain to begin to enjoy sex with your spouse and get that maximum benefit. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, and this is an issue that is rampant in, is it Japan with we were just recently talking about the culture of anime and how we get there's a lot of sexual imagery, and then even now the country is concerned about procreation because men and women are not coming together in marriage, and so they're worried about their population.
Exactly.
Because of the impact of masturbation and imagery, the pornographic imagery that's related in that. I mean, even people to the point of using like dolls and stuff blow up dolls and other
dolls. Yep.
like.
It is, and I mean, you can go and research it, but it is a real epidemic in Japan where they're talking about how do we get young men, especially, to have sex. Young people generally are not interested in quote unquote marriage and procreation, because but among other factors, that they do not see the need for sexual release in a relationship with another human. They can do it all by themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole with this, but coming back to church world, we have been guilty of just drawing very hard, bold lines where we say to people, masturbation is a no. This is a no. Only missionary position because mission is in the name.
Sex in the dark.
Sex in the dark. Like you don't want to see each other. What are we doing? Anyway.
So we're taking the joy and we're planting fear in an environment where there's supposed to be love and freedom.
Exactly. So let us talk about how we heal and reclaim God's design for sex in a marriage. First of all, bring your story to God, not your shame. Right? Bring your story to God, not your shame. If you're coming into a relationship and you're not, quote unquote, a virgin, don't come into the relationship with a shame. Take it to God and say, God, this is how I feel about my past. And I don't want it to affect my future with this person I'm about to be united to. Okay, super, super important. First of all, sort it out between yourself and God, because realize this, God is not condemning you. The Bible tells us in Isaiah 60, actually in Psalm, it talks about, what's the verse? Did we have it here? A broken spirit and a contrite heart, God will not despise, right?
Psalm 51:17.
Yeah, is it Psalm 51:17? Yeah. Psalm 51:17. A broken spirit and a contrite heart, God will not despise. God will not reject, And
I mean, it goes back to the fact that he knows you're living in this hidden secret sin that he knows about, and he still loves you regardless. And so you've got to deal with letting go of your own feelings towards yourself, your self-loathing or your own shame or your own anger about what happened to you, because maybe that, your virginity was stolen from you. So it's really a matter of bring that to God, bring the confusion, bring that trauma, bring your sexual sin to God. Let him, John 3:16 is our favorite verse that we quote, but John 17 says, 3:17 says that he came not to condemn the world, but to save the world.
Amen to that.
So he's not pointing a condemning finger at us. His goal is to save us, to rescue us, to cleanse us, and to restore us.
Exactly. And so I don't know what you have been through. If you have been through, quote unquote, sexual sin and or trauma and or confusion, whatever that is, just bring it to God. Again, if this doesn't apply to you because you're not in church world, it still does apply to you. You cannot beat yourself down for your past mistakes. You have to forgive yourself and find a way to heal and move on.
And it is a principle, literally, like that applies in counseling. Bringing to light things that have been hidden in darkness is healing. Whether you are praying to God or whether you're talking to somebody else and using their counsel to help guide you through a painful time in your life, exposing some bit of darkness, whatever has happened or whatever you've done that you might be ashamed of, helps you to find healing and helps to bring freedom.
Exactly. And then secondly, talk to your spouse about what you learned or didn't. And now I want to talk about this in two phases. First of all, in premarital counseling, one of the things that we advocate is kind of like this disclosure that you have with your would-be partner to just kind of like your sexual history. Because we have found that there's a lot of pain that is hidden there, especially if people have gone through abuse, et cetera, et cetera. Getting to talk to your future spouse about your experience and your past is important because, like you say, bringing things to light actually is healing in and of itself. And you also want them to understand, for example, and we have seen this with people who have gone through sexual abuse, where they will find it very hard to emotionally and physically connect with their partner because their partner might do certain things that may be triggering to them, right? If you haven't laid this out in the beginning, you do not have the grace and patience to walk with your partner as they process this new relationship, you know?
Yeah, I think that I'll go back to that piece of communication where you obviously, you may not know until you get in a sexual relationship again that something is triggering, but as soon as it does trigger you, make your spouse aware.
Aware, yes. So it has to be ongoing conversations. You know, you need to ask questions like before and during marriage, you know, what messages about sex did we bring into this marriage or are we bringing into this marriage? You know, what did we hear? What did we learn? What was taught? What was not taught? What did you talk about in your household? When you did, what did you, what was said about it?
What were you exposed to in
what
your
were you
household
exposed
or
to?
Elsewhere?
Exactly.
And what do we need to unlearn together?
Exactly. What do we, and how do we, where do we feel the tension, right? That is super important as well. Or confusion or fear, right? Like where you have to have this ongoing conversation. In fact, there's a project that I kind of put on the shelf for now because I just want to kind of sit on it, rethink, and we have been working on this tool that will help people have conversations around different issues in their marriage, in their relationship. It can be used by people preparing for marriage or already in marriage. And one of the things I've been thinking about is like, how can this tool be used for a sex debrief? You know, like, okay, you had your first sexual encounter with your spouse. Let's debrief. And how can this tool be a guide for people? I'm
trying to imagine my newly married self wanting to debrief.
Can we just talk about the orgasm that just happened? Like, how was it for you? You know, what did you like about it? Yeah, no, we kid, but I'm not.
We'll have to put some sort of rating on this video, right?
I think.
I don't know.
This episode is explicit.
Right.
It's explicit. Okay. Healing starts with shared honesty, right? That is super important to remember. That's when healing starts. And then thirdly, you want to invite God into the bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people made fun. I've heard people make fun of other people. You have to pray before you have sex. Well, why not?
Why
God
not?
already sees it. It's not something that we actively do, but we thank God for the ability to enjoy each other in this way.
Yeah, for us it naturally flows that way because we usually pray together before we go to bed anyway. And so, you know, that's just a smooth transition. I'm just saying, hey, let me take a drink because I got something to say.
Okay.
The other thing is this. Listen, I always tell people this. God is in the room.
Yeah.
No, you can hide under blankets. God has X-ray vision. Forget about it. Okay? God is not in the room sitting in a corner like, oh my gosh, my children are about to have sex. Let me close my eyes. No, God is not doing one of those. God is fully engaged with whatever is happening. And I know it sounds weird. And that is why it's super important to realize that you can go to God with anything and everything.
Yeah, he's invested in your well-being and health and wholeness in every arena. And like sex is a huge part of marriage, and it's he desires wholeness in this area as well.
Yes.
For you.
He's not embarrassed by it, by your intimacy. He created it.
I mean, Adam and Eve, they were naked and unashamed.
And unashamed.
And he saw them all the time, walking in the cool of the day in the garden.
Hello. Right? And I mean, so you want to pray for joy and peace and freedom and unity in your sex life. Okay. And that is super, super important. Pray for each other. That's why it's important to hear each other out. Like one of the things, and I'll just tell you this, that it is hard to have sex with somebody who is weighed down by so many things that have happened maybe during the day, or they're going through a particular season, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, it would be, I feel like if that person isn't able to have conversation or to work through or vent or talk about what has been going on in their day, they will either shut down and say no, or they'll be completely selfish.
Exactly. Yep.
Completely selfish in the
What
act.
is in this for me? Yeah. And I always say to guys that sex for women begins with the brain. Okay. It begins with them unloading, them getting things off their chest, them just connecting intellectually and emotionally and allowing them to just kind of lay it all down so that they can be fully present in the moment. Okay. And I'm not talking about tolerating your spouse just because you want to get to the end result. Right?
Right.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, really understanding that, my friend is going through this and it's important to her that I listen. And I used to have a problem with just listening when we got married, because every time I listened, I thought you wanted me to fix it. And until you told me I don't need you to fix this, which was still hard for me not to try and fix it. But I learned over the years that sometimes she just wants to talk.
I mean, so much
Vent.
throughout the day, male or female, we are processing information, putting a smile on and going on about our day, whether, we've taken an emotional beating or something it was just difficult, or we had some such level of stress, or we had bad news, or we have, the demands of being a parent, or whatever it is, we're pulled in many different directions. And if you're not engaging throughout the day, having sincere conversation and genuine care, genuine expressions of care throughout the day, like, how are you? Like, tell me about that meeting, or being mindful of the areas of your life where your spouse may be holding stress, it's going to inhibit or hinder that person, your wife or your spouse, whoever is the one carrying that stress, usually the wife, I feel like, probably. Maybe
no,
not.
I do. Well, there are days I do carry stress. For me, sometimes I just come home and I want to decompress and my wife calls it, she asks me, are you peopled out? Because I used to think that I was an extrovert, meaning that I gained energy by being around people. And I got to find the term. I'm between an extrovert and an introvert. I do need my downtime for me to recharge. And sometimes when I haven't had the time to kind of just sit and recharge, because I'm always giving, that is just my personality. But for me to properly connect with Amanda, I need to kind of withdraw for me to reconnect. I need to go down a rabbit hole of a binge watch or just reading or listening to a very long podcast. Sometimes I take a nap when I get back from work. And when she comes, I'm ready to engage. Because if I'm tired and she's coming in and, telling me about her day, it's hard for me to connect if I'm not spiritually and mentally prepared for that.
Yeah.
I know I just said a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it may seem like we're going on a tangent, but your sex life is related to how you relate to one another.
Oh, yeah.
Throughout the day, every day, how you express love, how you receive love, how you recharge, how you, how you treat each other in times of stress, how you share the load of responsibility within the home. So, all of that plays into the health of your sex life, whether you are both satisfied and fulfilled in that.
And I always say to guys, and this can be very long, and we're going long here, but
Yeah, I just was thinking that, but that's okay.
okay, so listen, I think we just need to do a separate one where we can talk about how to have great sex. I think that will be a great podcast to have, because I think some people out there do need other people's perspective on what it means to have great sex. Because I can tell you guys, for example, like I said before, sex doesn't begin when you're in the bedroom. It begins way before that. Sometimes for you to set up a real good sexual encounter might take a couple of days, if you know what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
The takeaway is... The takeaway is sex isn't just physical.
Yes.
It's deeply spiritual.
Exactly.
And it's a reflection of trust, playfulness, and vulnerability within your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's way more than a simple act that, takes 2, 3, 5, however many minutes it takes.
All right. So listen, God's view of sex is far better than what culture tells us, and far kinder than religion's view of what sex is. And whether you carried shame, fear, silence, or pain coming into a marriage, you can heal. Because sex is not just permitted in marriage, it should be celebrated. Mm-hmm. It should be celebrated and cherished. I don't know if you have any last words for our friends, because this was kind of like, it felt like almost off the cuff conversation, because you know me, I can go on a tangent with this one. But any last words?
I would just encourage you to know that there is healing for relationships that are not mutually beneficial in this particular area. And then again, and we've done several podcasts now, and a lot of it goes down to really the whole person. Not just a sexual being, we're physical beings, we're emotional beings, we're spiritual beings. So we really need to know that there is hope, but there's also some growth that can happen by confronting the challenges and working through them together. So as afraid as you may be about it, being honest about how you feel, where there may be shame related to that, the more you expose those things to the light, the more healing will come.
Exactly. And my last word to you is love each other. Mm-hmm. Love each other enough to really talk about what is working for you in terms of sex in your marriage, and be ready to be each other's support. All right. Mm-hmm. And we want you to comment below, what's one belief about sex that you're unlearning, whether together or as a couple, or relearning, really. Like, what are some of the things that you're relearning, right? And come back here again for some no holds barred conversations around
and hopefully
marriage.
Joy and laughter.
Yeah, joy and laughter. Hey. All right. Guys, we love you. And if you really want to dive into what are the topics that we have talked about on this podcast, I want you to check out this next video right here. All right. God bless you. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.